Hello everybody and welcome to the MerwinMusic YouTube channel. This video is sort of a follow-up to my last video where I built my Walnut pedalboard. So if you liked that video and are curious about how to build your own, then let's get started. The first thing that I did was took all of my pedals and a 1/2 inch thick piece of plywood and I laid the pedals out in kind of the way that I would want them. Now I didn't feel like building my own case for this pedalboard, so I worked from the pedals that I had and the size I needed, and also what sizes of pedalboard that Pedal Train and some other companies already make to determine the final size of my pedalboard. Then once I had the dimensions all laid out, I threw together a quick SketchUp file with the final dimensions. I settled on 24 by 14 inches for the overall size, and 1 3/4 inches tall in the front and 3 1/8 inches tall in the back. Then I picked up this piece of walnut from Rockler. This piece in particular was 13/16 thick, but that's basically 3/4, right? And then I marked out my 4 main sides. I cut them to rough length and then ran them through my joiner sled to get one straight edge, and then ripped them down to closer width. Next I cross-cut the pieces to length and laid them out. Then I measured my front and back height on the side pieces and then drew that line and cut it out on my taper jig on the table saw. Then once I had the sides cut to the right height, I adjusted my table saw blade angle to match the side pieces to cut the front and back to their final height. Next, I laid out the position of my input and output and power jacks on the side. I went with the center being 1 inch from the bottom of the pedalboard, mainly because it looked right and it was the width of my ruler, so it made it nice and simple. Then I drilled partway down with a 1 inch bit to set the countersink for the lip on the jacks, and then went back with a 7/8 bit and finished the hole. For the IEC power jack, the process was similar, however I used the router bit to cut first the square hole, then I dropped the power jack into place and drew a line around it. Then I set my bit depth to equal the depth of that outer flange, and then routed out the space, checking a couple times to make sure that it was a good fit. Next, I went to work cutting dovetails to join the pieces together. I'm not going to get into how to cut dovetails here since it's beyond the scope of this video, and I'm still pretty bad at them. However, there are a number of ways to join this up. Either you could use a box joint or simply a butt joint with dowels to hide some screws. As far as the woodworking is concerned, this pedalboard is similar to a drawer, so if you want some ideas of different ways to put together, that is what I suggest, is looking at how to build drawers and tons of other videos out there. So with that all done, I glued my pedalboard together and checked to make sure that all of it was square. Then I went to work on the pedalboard deck. I used the same piece of 1/2 inch plywood that I used to figure out the size of the pedalboard, and then after some trial and error, laid out a pattern that just looked right and cut some holes in the top using a 3/4 inch router bit. At this point, I rounded the outside edges of the pedalboard with a 1/4 inch roundover bit, which I forgot to film, and then I sanded the entire pedalboard with 150 and 220 grit sandpaper. Next, I cut a bottom panel for the pedalboard the same size as the top out of a 1/4 inch MDF. I then gave the bottom and top panel a once-over with some matte black spray paint. Then using some high-strength spray adhesive, I followed the instructions on the can and glued a piece of West Coast Pedalboard's Super Loop fabric to the pedalboard deck. After that, I came back with a utility knife and cut slits into the fabric where the holes are. Next, I got these spring-loaded cabinet hinges from Amazon, and I laid them out under the top with the whole pedalboard upside down. I screwed them in and measured and cut a piece of walnut to fit under the pedalboard top and a 1/4 inch from the bottom of the front edge. That way, this solid piece will hold up the front edge of the deck where most of your stepping pressure will be, and it will hold on the front edge of the bottom piece. I screwed that piece in and then marked and drilled and attached these friction catches that I also picked up from Amazon. Now, one part that I forgot to film was I cut 2 standoffs about 3/4 by 3/4 by 2 inches tall to fill in my back corners. These are set 1/4 from the bottom edge, and along with the front piece that I added, will hold the rubber feet and that bottom panel on. Now that I had everything put together, I took it all apart again and gave the pedalboard 1 coat of boiled linseed oil. After that had dried, I put some finishing nails into the bottom corners of the pedalboard to hold it completely up in the air, and then gave the pedal board 2 coats of polyurethane, lightly sanding between coats with 400 grit sandpaper. Then when everything was dry, I could drop in the bottom panel and hold it in with some rubber feet. I then reattached the top panel with the hinges. Now you can see here I ended up adding a back middle support for the bottom panel in the middle out of just a scrap of 1/4 inch MDF. That way, in addition to the 4 feet holding the bottom corners in place, I put an extra screw in the front middle into that cleat and one in the back middle into that extra scrap. The last step after I screwed everything into place was to add the power strip to the inside. I got this one from Amazon and I simply attached it to the back inside of the pedal board using the keyholes on the back of the power strip. I then cut the cord, stripped it back, and then soldered the hot, neutral, and ground to the appropriate plugs, which is not the ones I show here. I realized right after I finished that I hadn't done the neutral and the hot the right way, so I took those back apart, flipped them around the right way, and got it right in the end. Lastly, I stuck some Velcro to the bottom of my power supply, and then with the adhesive peeled off one side, I stuck the whole thing down to the bottom panel. And with that, the whole thing is finished and ready for some pedals. As I mentioned in the video, the hinges, friction catches, and the power strip all came from Amazon. The walnut I picked up at Rockler, and the plywood and MDF I had laying around, but you could pick those up easily at any home center. And the rest of the hardware and the top deck fabric I got from West Coast Pedalboard. Thank you all for watching and making it this far. Let me know in the comments below if you make your own or are planning to make your own. But most of all, thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.